Yields. I now recognize Mr. Pfluger for 5 minutes of questioning.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we hear today is just a political theater at its very best. We're talking about the human tragedy, the human cost, the financial cost, the burden on farmers and ranchers, what you're seeing in Arizona, what we're seeing in New York City. Mr. Burley, you said about 65,000 illegal immigrants in New York City right now?
Correct.
That is 0.1% of the total amount of illegal immigrants that have come into this country under President Joe Biden's watch. 0.1%. And the mayor of New York is standing up saying, we can't handle this, we can't do this. I agree with the mayor on that point. He can't. He can't handle it. It was earlier said by Mr. Reichlin Melnick that he couldn't imagine anything, and I'm quoting here, there can't be anything worse than taking a child from a parent's arms. Did you say that today at this hearing?
Yes.
Okay, there can't be anything worse than taking a child from a parent's arms. 100,000+ children from the age of 18 into their mid-20s, early 30s, young adults, have died as a result of the poisoning of fentanyl this year. Does that count?
Congressman, fentanyl and migration
Does that count?
Separate issues.
Does that count as taking a child from a parent's arms?
The opioid epidemic has every family in this country.
I'm
going to
reclaim
very
my time.
clear.
I'm going to reclaim my time. I'm going to reclaim my time. 100,000+. And yet we hear that the fentanyl issue is unrelated to illegal immigration. What a farce. I have no question for you. Thank you. Mr. Lyons, talk to me about the human trafficking issue in Arizona. Tell our colleagues on the other side of the aisle about a stash house where you have separation of children who are being molested, assaulted, raped, and tortured in Arizona.
We have across the border at Morelos Dam what many have called the rape tree. And while visiting that area with members of the Judiciary and Oversight Committee, we encountered medication that had been thrown to the ground the day after pill. And in speaking with some of those people that had been taken to Amberley's place and others taken into custody with Border Patrol, they had reported being violated multiple times. I spoke to a young man who had been sent back to Mexico multiple times, who was caring for his sister. His father died on the road, and he was prostituting himself in order to take care of his sister and her children. We have seen, and our Sheriff Leon Wilmot, who has testified before this committee previously, that 5,000 to 10,000 children are trafficked through Yuma. And this, in these numbers that we talk about, we don't even talk about those who are coming across the gotaways, those who are actually being smuggled across.
That's right. And yet this doesn't count, does it? This doesn't count for taking a child from their parents' arms.
If I may, Congressman, just speak to the fentanyl. Yuma and the border communities have a disproportionately high number of overdoses or poisonings. My wife, in visiting with one of her close friends at my home, called me 3 hours later. After her friend had left, she walked into her home and found her 18-year-old son suffering from a fentanyl overdose, and he died 2 days later. Our rate of fentanyl poisonings on the border is 19 times higher.
And 90% of the precursors are coming from China into Mexico, crossing the border, and yet we have people testifying today that are saying that it's unrelated to the crisis that we face. This crisis has cost Texas $5 billion last year, $5 billion this year, $9 to $10 billion next year. I have the sheriff of Ector County, Odessa, Texas, texting me right now saying that in July, 1,041 prisoner days due to illegal immigration were taken up in the Ector County Sheriff's Prison. That was just in July. You amortize that across the entire year, it's almost $1 million just on illegal immigration. We have a crisis at our southern border. I invite, once again, my colleagues from the other side of the aisle to join us and go down there and figure this out. And yes, H.R. 2 is the solution that we need. The president must stop this crisis at our border. He must end the absolute abuse, rape, and torture of these kids that's going on as a result of the cartels owning the southern border. And I yield back.